allihopa! Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Say It in Swedish. I'm your host, JOAKIM, and today we are gonna talk about reductions, and it sounds super boring, I know, but the thing is that English, if you learn English, you need to learn a lot of irregularities when it comes to spelling and pronunciation. And the English is up here with the giants, and Swedish is about here, pretty mediocre, but we have a lot of things that doesn't make sense if you're only learning written Swedish and you want to speak Swedish. And when we start putting words and sounds together into sentences, even more things change. So we need to go through that today. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, grab a beer, and let's talk about this because it's gonna be a lot of information here. Maybe you should take notes as well. But I'm looking at you. You need to know this. I think this video is probably gonna be called something like the ultimate guide to Swedish reductions, but I will probably have missed something. And if you think I have, or if you have heard a word or a sentence that isn't pronounced as you think it should have been pronounced, please let me know in the comments down below and I will help you with that. Or if I get enough comments, I will probably make a follow-up. But I have my notes here. Let's jump right into it and talk about one of the most important and frequent reductions, and that's o. O can mean either och, which means and, or att, which means to, as an infinitive marker. Only in this case. An infinitive marker, like to go, to be. That's att in Swedish. So, both these words can be pronounced o, and they are probably gonna be pronounced o. And this confuses Swedes as well. So, yeah, Swedes can sometimes spell wrong or use like if they are typing or trying to have a good diction, they will use the wrong word maybe because they are confused themselves. So we have du och jag. Du och jag. You and me. Du och jag. Du och jag. All right? But then we have jag gillar att dansa. I like to dance. Jag gillar att dansa. Jag gillar att dansa. Jag gillar att dansa. Not jag gillar och dansa. All right? So this is something that confuses Swedes because you will probably sometimes see jag gillar och dansa or something like that written maybe in chat or whatever. I don't know. It happens, all right? So this one is the most frequent one, I guess, or maybe it's super common. Let's put it that way. And let's move on to some more maybe difficult but also very common stuff. So adjectives and adverbs on IG or IGT and all the derivatives like in plural you have IGA and so on. You can see on the screen what I'm talking about. The G is silent basically every time. So we have gullig, which means cute, gullig, but I'm gonna say it as gullig. And that goes for all the derivative forms in the neuter gender and the plural. So we have gulligt, no G there, and gulliga, no G there either. So that's something to note. Super important and super common. And then we have adjectives and adverbs on SKT. K is silent here and turns to st. So fantastic in Swedish is fantastiskt. Fantastiskt. Not fantastiskt. That's not what we usually say. We can. It's super, like, let's say it's normal to say that, and if I want to be clear, I say that. But casually, what I mean by that is when I'm not speaking clear, I'm just speaking. I don't mean informal and formal here. I'm just speaking. I say fantastiskt. Det var fantastiskt. You can hear a lot of reductions in that sentence, by the way. And then we move on to verbs, because we have something super interesting here. It's a super interesting, let's say, development. So verbs in the present tense, they tend to end on an R. The R gets dropped in a sentence. Verbs in preterite, in the simple past basically, they end on DE, or tend to end on DE. That ending gets dropped. And verbs in supinum. Supinum is a form that we use to make the perfect tense and the past perfect tense. That T that we have there gets dropped. So basically, if we have a group one word, let's say studera, because it's a word that you will most likely use a lot. Att studera, so to speak, to study. In the present tense, it turns into jag studerar something. Jag studerar biologi. No R there. And the past tense, jag studerar biologi. You need to listen for time words there. And then we have, jag har studerat biologi. Jag har studerat biologi. You can see a lot of reductions there. So, jag har studerat biologi. Jag studerar biologi. T gets dropped there. So this is something super common, but also super annoying for you, probably, because you can really hear what we are talking about and which tense we are talking about. So let's move on to word boundaries, because this is some juicy stuff. So, age often gets dropped in word boundaries. So if I have something like jag har, so I'm gonna get to that, but the G in jag gets dropped. It's basically ja all the time. Then har, I'm not dropping the H just like that. I say the word is har, not like with G in jag, where I say the word for I is ja. That's normal on its own. But if I say har, for instance, to have, or I have, then I wouldn't drop the H when just telling you the word stand alone. However, in a sentence, the H will most likely disappear. So you have jag har det, jag har det, jag har det. It's more like a long A or a little push, like jag har. Can you see? Or can you see what I mean? You hear what I mean. So that's something to think about. Jag har det. Jo, men det har jag. Det har jag. Needs to go very fast for that, but the H is not there. Swedes watching this will probably say, well, I'm saying H. Are you really? It's hard to know. Then we have the word inte, which means not. And that I, inte, that one. That vowel tends to be reduced to either or schwa, or it gets dropped entirely and merges with the preceding vowel. Jag har inte det. Jag har inte det. So, jag har inte det. Alright? It's hard to hear, but now you know, so maybe it's easier now. Then we have an interesting thing that is mostly done in Stockholm. So, not everywhere, but yeah, you will hear it a lot for obvious reasons. So, unstressed pronouns and the word då that begin with D, that D gets reduced to an R for some reason. And this is kind of interesting because they do that in some Finnish dialects, and Finnish is unrelated to Swedish. But it's just an interesting thing to note because I've only ever heard about it there and in Swedish, and obviously in American English, D or T tends to move in that direction. So it's more like a tap than a D or a T. So like, it's not water, it's water or water. There. Think about that. So if we have det or du or da or dom, etc., turns into ru, rom, ra, re, etc. So for instance, we have är du här? Are you here? Är du här? Är du här? So we have är, and remember the rule about the verb, the present tense are getting dropped, so we have är left. And in the Stockholm area, that turns into e. And in other areas, it's an ä, etc. It can be anything. And that's is or are in Swedish. And then we have du, which gets reduced to ru. It's unstressed. So, and as I've said in other videos, all syllables that are unstressed, they are short. They are very short. So the word is du with a long u, but in this case it should be unstressed for this to work, so I'm pronouncing it ru, u. Alright? So är du här. And then we can drop that H. So that's that. Let's move on to something that you probably know. This is a super normal thing, that N plus G is an ng sound and N plus K is an nk sound. It has nothing to do with Swedish. However, this also happens in word boundaries. So we have the word han, which means he, and kommer, which means comes, and it's han kommer. Han kommer. So the N turns into a ng. Han kommer. Okay? Han kommer. Han kommer. And then we have our beloved retroflex consonants. Obviously, I have a video about those. But in short, let's take it one more time. R plus S turns into sh. R plus T and R plus D turns into t and d. And R plus N turns into n. And R plus L turns into l. So, this happens in word boundaries. And the thing here to note is that since these reductions are common, but it's a continuum and they are fluent a little bit, they don't occur every time, and sometimes not even in the same sentence every time. So it's not consistent, which means that if we have a verb, like I said, in the present tense, we have an R there. So if the verb meets one of these consonants, normally you would get a retroflex sound, right? But sometimes the R gets dropped and this doesn't happen. All right? So for instance, är skolan stängd? Is the school closed? Är skolan stängd? Är skolan stängd? Är skolan stängd? No retroflex thing there. However, it can also begin to say är. So, är skolan stängd? Är skolan stängd? I would use both of these. Not think about when and where. It just happens. But you need to know, är skolan stängd and är skolan stängd? Är skolan stängd? Both happens in my speech. So now you know. And related to this are, of course, letter combinations. I already talked about letter combinations like N, J, and NK, and all the retroflex consonants because they are combinations of R plus a consonant. But we also have a few that don't really work in word boundaries. For instance, TL, and I don't think most Swedes, they don't think about this at all, that this exists. And it's not something that exists all the time. I think it's like you don't even need to use this. It's not that common, but I wanted to mention it because Swedes will talk like this and you will get confused. So you need to know about this. So the word äntligen, this is basically the most common word for this combination. It's äntligen, which means finally. It turns into äntligen. Äntligen. So first, the standard word is äntligen, and that G, as you can see on the screen, is dropped, as I said before, right? It's an adverb where it doesn't end in IG, but it's part of the word anyway, so it's like two endings here, ig and en, igen. So äntligen. It's just how it is. So you just need to accept that. And then we have TL, which turns into KL, KL for some reason. And that N then obviously needs to turn into N, so äntligen. And that's especially something children say, but also adults. So you need to know. You need to know. Then we have N and M in front of plosive like P and B. And then we have N plus P or B. And P and B, they are plosives. They explode out of your mouth with air. And you need your lips sealed for those. And you start making that sound, or you prepare for that sound even before you do that. So the N is a C, my lips are not sealed, turns into the M here instead. So en bil, one car or a car, turns into M-bil. M-bil. It's something Swedes don't really think about, I think, but if you're thinking about it, you'll see that it's true. M-bil, not en-bil. That sounds like you are gonna speak very clearly. Someone needs to write down what you're saying, so you say en-bil, but it's M-bil. M-bil, it's in your nasal and lip sealed and stuff. So that's good to know if you want to. Maybe it just comes naturally to you, but it's good to know anyway. And then we have assimilation that I talked about before. So the unvoiced consonants, like T, they are unvoiced. You don't use your vocal cords for those, like D. D is the voiced version of T. And you have K is the unvoiced version of G, 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 K, K, and so on. When those meet in a word, it could be word boundaries and it could be compounds, then the unvoiced consonant is king, just so you know. We can instantly hear this with a word like snub. B, b, snub, it's voiced, b is voiced. And we turn that into snapped because we have the T there. The T is an ending. We slap that on there. We slap that thing. And the B turns into P. So snapped. We have the same thing with hög, which means loud. Högt is loudly. So it turns into K. Högt. Right? And we have a word like absolute. Absolute is a loan word. You have absolutely. I guess in English you would use an z there, or maybe I'm wrong here, but it would make sense. So it's absolutely. But in Swedish, since we don't have z, it's s, and it's unvoiced. The s is unvoiced, so the b turns into a p, because S is unvoiced and S is king. Z is voiced. S is unvoiced. Is unvoiced. So absolute. So that's super important to know because this is something that occurs within words as well. Let's end this video by talking about a few letters that are most commonly going to be silent and common words that are super often, basically all the time, pronounced with reduction. So we have D, for instance, super common to just drop that. So we have, for instance, vad, which means what, turns into va or va. No D there. We have bredvid, which it sounds super weird to pronounce it like that. Bredvid. It's brevi. Brevi or brevet. It's super weirdly reduced, but it's brevet. Sounds like a cheese. But it depends on the person, and I would use both of these, brevi or brevet or whatever. Then it means beside, by the way. And then we have vid, which means like close by, so to speak, nearby, at, etc. Vid is often just vi when it's reduced. Han är vid something something. He is by the pound or at the thing. Then we have sedan, which is most likely gonna be pronounced as sen, which means later or then. Sen. So here, the D gets dropped, but also the A gets dropped because we don't say sean, it's weird. It's sen. Then we have ledsen, which means sad. It's ledsen. However, it's super weird to say this D. In these other words, it's not weird to use it, but for me, I've never heard anyone ever say ledsen. It's just weird. It's ledsen. No, it's ledsen. Then we have tidning or tidning, which means newspaper. Tidning. Not super weird to use the D there. Tidning. Tidning. However, it's most likely going to be tidning. Then we have G, and I talked about G before in the adjectives. If you remember, we drop the G ending. Here we have jag, which means I. Most likely, almost every time, gonna be ja. Alright? Ja. Then we have dag, which means day. Most likely gonna be da. And that also goes for all the forms. Dan, which is dagen. We have the same change here like in sedan, because the G gets dropped and also the next vowel. So it's dan, not daen or something. Then dar. We have dar. Dagar, but dar. And then we have någon, which means someone or anyone. Någon. G gets dropped and also the following vowel. Like you can see a pattern here, right? So that gets dropped and we get non. Just like with sedan or dagar or whatever. Then we have Nuagot, which is in itself short for någonting, which means something. So någon, like I said, someone or anyone, it's also some. And here it's together with ting, which comes from, or it doesn't come from thing, but it's related to thing, ting, thing, some, thing. Någon, ting. But we also have något. And then one level extra, not. Spelling it not or non is not really accepted, but you will see it in chats depending on your age. If you're gonna be on Discord, for instance, you might see not and non depending on the age group you are talking to. Then we have några, which means like some people, some, några. The G is dropped there, några. And the last word here in this group that I wanted to talk to you about is morgon. And maybe you can guess what it is. Maybe not. But if I say morgon, I'm not talking about moron here. I'm talking about morrow. So morning. Morgon means morning. It turns into morgon. However, it can also go one step further and the O gets dropped, the last O. So we get morn. And there R meets N. So we get the retroflex N here. Morn. And this is something that goes for, like all words you would construct with this. So, for instance, imorgon, which means tomorrow. Imorgon, imorgon, imorgon. All right? And that's also why a lot of people think we are wishing people a good moron. When we say good morning, it sounds like god morgon. Like I said, D gets dropped a lot. So we have go instead of god. Good drop the D here. Go, and then morgon instead of morgon. So morgon, god morgon, god morgon. But something to note here, it's not good moron. It's not a long O there because the R is long. Swedish syllables have to be either short or long, and the stressed syllables, they are long. So go is unstressed. Then we have mo, r is mor. It's a long R there. It's not a long O, it's long R, right? So god morgon. God morgon. I'm exaggerating now so that you can hear the R is long, not the O or O sound. God morgon. God morgon. I had to look at myself because it feels weird to say that. But that's that. Let's move on to L. We have the words vilken, vilket, and vilka. Just like någon, något, några. Vilken, vilket, vilka. It's a group of words that means the same depending on plural, singular, gender, etc. It means what in this case. It's not what as in va, va. It's like what school, what thing, what, etc. That's, or which, vilken. The L gets dropped here. So we have vilken, because the I is short. The I is short, right? The syllable needs to be long. So if L gets dropped, the K has to be extended. So it's vilken. Vilken. It's a long K. Vilken. Vilken. The L is long, but that's dropped. So you need to extend the K. Vilken. Vilken. Vilket. Vilket. Vilka. Vilka. Okay? And to finally end this video, I wanted to talk to you about R and T. I just have a few examples here, so it's very short. So we already talked about R getting dropped in, the verbs. Present tense, R gets dropped. The same goes for var, which means where. Where. So var could also lose its R in a sentence. We also have T and mycket. Mycket it's a word that we don't use that much anymore. We use intensifiers, or we use väldigt, for instance. Väldig plus T. G is dropped. Väldigt. Side note. But yeah. So mycket turns into mycket when we are using it. Mycket. Mycket. And det, a word that is super important in Swedish. T is dropped, yeah. I say det. In some dialects it's da, but the T is dropped no matter what. Wow, that was a lot. Here you got a few of the most common reductions and also words that are most commonly gonna be pronounced reduced just like that. They are basically always reduced, and it's super important for you to know these things, because that's why people always want me to do slow Swedish, but I really always try to use these reductions in these slow Swedish videos, because other Swedes, if they were gonna speak slowly, they wouldn't speak slowly, they would speak clearly. So they wouldn't speak as Swedes speak, they would just be very clear, so you would understand them if you know how to write Swedish. But if they would speed up, they would start to... It's brittle, it would start to lose sounds, right? So that's super important that if you listen to slow Swedish, it has to be my slow Swedish because I reduce. Yeah, something like that. But I don't do many of those videos, so I thought you need to listen to normal speed most of the times. I think you need to get used to normal speed right away, and that's why this video is super important for you. Anyway, if you need more real lessons, like if you want to go through everything systematically, you could go to sayitinswedish.com, where I have lessons, but I also have other content for learning Swedish, like vocabulary lists and so on. And if you want to support my project, you can do that on Patreon. Become a Patreon member, unlock some extra goodies on the site, and you can talk to me and ask questions, ask me questions or other fans and learners over at our Discord community. All links are in the description down below. And watch another video, because I have a lot of them. Alright, vi ses i nästa video. Ha det bra, puss och kram, hejdå!